foul tarnished. In search of the Elden Ring.
Hello, my name. Ooh, let's try this again. Hello, my name is. I'm gonna get you. All right, third time's a charm. Hello, my name is. Come on. There we go. Hello, my name is Zachary Cush, and I let a not insignificant chunk of my finite life be consumed by Elden Ring. So did I think it was good? Well, pour some ranch dressing onto your brain salad in preparation for how many words I end up reading into this microphone in order to find out. Let's ask, then answer the question, Elden Ring. Is it good? Before we quench our collective thirsts with the crisp wetness of my final opinion, let us begin with one of my top 5 favorite texts. Context. The academically trained, autodidactically astute, or detective aficionados amongst you might have noticed that I tend to talk more about the context surrounding my opinions and thoughts as much as, if not more, than I spend talking about the opinions themselves. This is for 2 primary reasons. One, it acts as a buffer against the exact kinds of people I don't want leaving their filth all over the comments section. And 2, the goal of any rhetoric is not per se to persuade, but rather to make one's reasoning as clear as possible. It's more important to me that you, my dear viewer, understand why I hold the opinion that I do, rather than simply having me state the opinion or having you agree with me. What I am offering you is additional information, vital context with which you can make a wiser choice. And in exchange, you're giving me your attention, and maybe even some money.
But please, can you offer poor ill-starred Pythia a little something by way of compensation?
Look, the point I'm trying to make is that I am a From Software fan, okay? I have bought all the way in, and I have pushed all of my chips into the middle of the table. I have been on the bandwagon for so long that the bandwagon has become my house. I live there. All my stuff is there. So, for those of you looking at this particular bandwagon and are thinking that maybe that's a bandwagon that you'd perhaps like to be a part of, I, as a bandwagon-laden fan of FromSoft, would like to liken liking FromSoft games to being into a band. FromSoft is one of those moderately successful bands that pokes its head into the mainstream every now and again and pulls off a hit or a Grammy here and there, but mostly just generates a respectable niche upon which it sustains itself. Kind of like, say, Electric Light Orchestra, or Modest Mouse, or my favorite band, Porcupine Tree. Each FromSoft release is like your favorite band putting out a new album. This new album will, of course, be in the recognizable style of your favorite band, but it will take that band's strengths into an exciting new direction. So it is with FromSoft games. Thematically similar, but each with a different focus. The Kingsfield games are like every Porcupine Tree album released before Stupid Dream, in that I haven't really listened to any of them, but what I have listened to I don't really care for. That's right, I don't like literally 40% of the albums released by my favorite band, and there's nothing that you can do to stop me. Demon's Souls is a lot like Stupid Dream, in that it really encapsulates everything that's great about the band, and though it has some great moments, it never quite reaches what it's going for. Dark Souls 1 is a lot like In Absentia, in that it's both the most famous one and the one that you should definitely start with, as it's the best at teaching you exactly how to get into this stuff. And both Dark Souls 1 and In Absentia kind of fall apart at the end, though their closing moments are very powerful. Dark Souls 2 is a lot like Steven Wilson's entire solo career, in that, boy howdy, there's a lot of it. And some of it's pretty good, but mostly there's just a lot of it, and it kind of feels like it's missing something, you know? Bloodborne is FromSoft's Deadwing, both in that it's my favorite and it's the most focus. It aims for a specific thing and accomplishes it, whereas all the other ones are admittedly kind of meandering. Dark Souls 3 is a lot like Fear of a Blank Planet, and that it's also sort of my favorite, but it doesn't really progress the brand anywhere, you know what I mean? It's just kind of a greatest hits of the concepts that the artist is known for, and like, yeah, their greatest hits are still really good, but you kind of just walk away from the experience with the same guilt you feel when you eat a lot of ice cream that you know you shouldn't have. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a lot like The Incident in that I haven't really listened to it. I'm sure one of these days I'll just like really get in there and devour it, but I just haven't had the time and it hasn't quite caught my attention yet. Anyway, the point of all that is to say that FromSoft has got what I need, and they're the only one in town who's got it. So what exactly does FromSoft got, and why does a very loud, very confident niche like it so much? Perhaps the loudest buzzing of all SoulsBorne buzzwords is difficulty. This buzzword, difficulty, is often cited as an avatar of reticence by trepidatious SoulsBorne precipice dwellers. However, difficulty is a nebulous word, conjuring visions of hard for hard's sake amateurishness, quarter-greedy pizza parlor arcade games, or the impenetrable esotericism of difficulty selection screens. Like, Ken, I've never played this game before. I don't know how good I'll be at it. Why don't you tell me which difficulty I should select? You're the game designer, and I'm just some guy who put his credit card information to Steam. Look, dude, what does 1999 mode even mean? I was 5 in 1999, and as time slips into the future, everyone who's ever seen 1999 will be dead. What exactly is the difference between adept and apprentice? Well, the difference seems to be whether or not these wolves take 9 or 19 sword hits to kill. The invocation of difficult brings to mind memories of confusion, frustration, and bewilderment.
So,
Asks the SoulsBorne prospective buyer.
why would I want to spend $60 and 60 hours being confused, frustrated, and bewildered on purpose?
Because, I would answer, SoulsBorne games are not difficult for difficult's sake. They are not obstinate. SoulsBorne games want you to beat them, and they want that act to be meaningful. SoulsBorne games are not about difficulty. They are about overcoming obstacles. Elden Ring exemplifies this formula perfectly in its first hours. The first proper boss the player will face is Margit, the Fell Omen, who will almost certainly crush the player into a tarnished pancake during their first encounter. Here, Elden Ring has put up a brick wall and will wait patiently for you to figure out how to tear it down. The goal has been set. Defeat Margit. The barrier between yourself and that goal is skill. It is, of course, possible to defeat Margit with just skill alone, should you thoroughly master the game's systems. However, mastery is not required, and probably isn't very fun anyway. Hidetaki Poison Swamps Miyazaki does not demand perfection from you. He demands that you get that boss's HP down to 0. And his game provides you with a broad variety of tools in your arsenal to get that boss's HP down to 0. It doesn't matter how you do it. You can level up your character, you can level up your equipment, you can endlessly practice the fighting mechanics against the endlessly responding mooks in the surrounding area. You can find new equipment that you like better. You can learn some healing spells, some fire spells, or some sorceries. You can craft items. You can craft bombs. You can cover your weapon with a magic bar of soap or something and set it on fire. You can summon NPCs to help you. You can summon other players to help you. You can buy an item from patches that will stun Margit 15 hours after that item would have been helpful, because you didn't find patches until you'd already beaten Godric. You can explore the intricately designed world map, complete catacomb-skinned dungeons, fight mini-bosses, gain skills and experience, meet characters who can sell and teach you cool stuff. You have been given tools and a target. You make the difficulty. You are the difficulty slider. Margit is defeatable with just pure skill, but you can supplement that skill with other game mechanics. You build the bridge between yourself and your goal. If you don't want to just rely on your skill, then level up your character a bunch, or summon a buddy, or learn how to make bombs. Cheese your way to victory as much as you want. All that matters is that you get that boss's HP down to 0, and you decide how you're gonna do it. So, with all that in mind, let's answer a popular question.
Should Dark Souls have an easy mode?
No. That defeats the whole purpose. A crack team of bespectacled Japanese people have spent thousands and thousands of hours of thankless work meticulously crafting a game which slowly yet perniciously teaches you how to both play it and how to love playing it. And you want to undo all of that masterful work with a difficulty slider? Hey man, maybe Hidetaki,
You bet your butt crack there's a storm ruler fight in this game.
Miyazaki knows a little bit more about how to make a video game than you do. And part of what makes his games so good is that you get to decide how easy you want to make your experience by engaging with the game's mechanics. You get to decide how underpowered or overpowered you get before you fight a boss. You get to decide if you use spells or not, if you summon other players or not, if you coat your sword in fire soap or not. That's the beauty of it. Elden Ring doesn't have all of this crap in it just for the sake of having a bunch of crap in it. It has all this stuff so you can give yourself an edge. And you need every advantage you can get so you can put Margit into the dirt. SoulsBorne games make difficulty fun. The joy is in the overcoming. And Miyazaki knows that joy is meaningless if he just gives it to you. You give it to yourself. Oh, and it's just so good. And what's best is that you're not doing this alone.
Hey!
SoulsBorne games have a very vibrant, very active community. Why? Because one of your main tools in overcoming their challenges is other people, both in-game NPCs and your real-life flesh and blood fellow humans. Yes, some people can be pricks, but most people are not pricks. Most people will happily help you with very little incentive other than to just do it. Even the people who will invade and try to kill you will honorably gesture at you before they do it. Let me explain the experience to you like this. When you boot up your first SoulsBorne game, you are a Dark Souls baby. Being a baby, you have no experience and no frame of reference with which to understand the world that you're gazing up at. You're going to get crushed by a tree sentinel several times. You're gonna have trouble figuring out the flow of the combat. You're going to make sloppy mistakes. The game is going to checkmate you several times. But with a little perseverance and a little patience, you will make it through the early challenges. At this point, you have graduated to a Dark Souls adolescent. Then Margit's gonna crush you into dust. And just like a real adolescent, you're going to have to decide whether or not getting crushed into dust is going to turn you into a monster or not. And also, just like a real adolescent, you're going to have to realize that part of growing up is recognizing how much you owe your success to the granular acts of kindness from other people, most of whom are complete strangers. This realization graduates you into a Dark Souls adult. Your fellow Dark Souls adults will leave messages for you to, say, warn you of dangers, or help you with puzzles, or inform you of nearby enemy weaknesses. And some of their messages are jokes, and some of those jokes are even funny. Other Dark Souls adults will leave their summoning signs to help you with bosses, or even whole areas. Their kindness sings to you. Being a good Dark Souls adult means recognizing that the world is full of many other Dark Souls babies. To assume that they also had your expertise is to possess the haughty arrogance of a character in Greek mythology who's about to be damned to Tartarus. Other Dark Souls players are your children. Be good to your children. If you get killed by an enemy ambush, leave a note warning others of that ambush so that they can learn from your mistakes. After other people help you defeat Godric, put your summoning sign down so that you can help other people defeat Godric. Convince some friends to play with you. Give your friends the equipment that you're not using. Like, come on man, you're not using it. Help them out. Compare your experiences. You will have encountered something that they have missed, just as they will have encountered something that you have missed. In the face of adversity, all we truly have is each other. Just like in real life, we don't always have to go it alone. You have friends, or you can be a friend to others. Or you can be an invader and spend hours of your life mildly inconveniencing strangers in order to get literally the same thing that you get for being nice.
Try fingers. Butthole.
And of course, all this talk about challenge and Dark Souls babies would be rendered absurd without the context and purposeful design which surrounds it. Elden Ring, like all SoulsBorne games, is at its heart about fighting cool enemies. All of its great art direction, all of its stellar level design, all of its purposefully opaque storytelling, all of its utter nonsense, all of it serves to make fighting cool enemies as contextually interesting as possible. My mind immediately turns to that sequence in Return of the King where the camera luxuriates on shots of Minas Tirith, as the heroes ascend to the Citadel and the Court of the Fountain. In a FromSoft game, this 2-minute sequence would translate into a 2.5-hour, meticulously designed level full of thematically appropriate foes, goodies and trinkets around every corner, secret paths and shortcuts, stellar level design, and then at the top, in the Grand Hall, accompanied by a bombastic score, there would be a fabulously grotesque boss named something like
Rotten Star!
who would bash you over the head with a lightning halberd or whatever. And all of that struggle, all of that time spent slowly conquering the level, only to reach the peak and overcome the final challenge with the sweet visual splendor of the boss's dramatic death animation, concludes with a cathartic release so satisfying it might as well be classified as a hard drug. And all of this work, all the art direction, all the concept art, all the esoteric and obtuse lore, all the modeling, all the level design, all the combat mechanics, all the music, all of it, it all serves to make this moment, killing a boss, as satisfying as possible. And you're not killing just some boss monster. No, you're killing
Mithrandas, the Rotten Star!
a superhuman demigod who's been hyped up across countless hours in cutscenes, NPC dialogue, lore, and item descriptions. Also, he squashed you into pancake batter 17 times, and you're not going to bed
Until you get your revenge.
It's one of the few things in modern culture that feels worthy of the adjective
Epic.
It's like a more interesting Greek mythology where you get to whap Hermes with a halberd. It's just a hot-boggling, brain-slapping good time. Solid, delicious proof that the best media on this pre-apocalyptic, corporatized heck Earth is media produced by talented craftspersons with vision and expertise. And you know what? Even if Elden Ring was the worst FromSoft game, it'd still be head and shoulders above the slurry that Ubisoft or EA releases. And if you watch a trailer or a gameplay demo of this game and think even for just an instant anything along the lines of
Oh yeah, cool man, I'd play that game.
then get Elden Ring and play it. The chances are, after a brief babyish adjustment period, it's going to be your new favorite game until the next From Software games come out. So, is Elden Ring good? Yes. In fact, it's so good it may as well be perfect.
Well, that ends the recommendation portion of this video essay. If anything I've talked about sounds like a rip-roaring fun time for you, then you owe it to yourself to purchase Elden Ring, because it's everything SoulsBorne but louder and tighter, and there's more of it. Buy it, dive into it blind, maybe chat with a few buddies who are playing it, and drink that delicious victory juice. For everybody else, or the people who crave even more information and don't mind some spoilers, we're gonna get into some specifics here, which involves spoilers. So here's your spoiler warning. Spoilers! So let me begin this little fireside chat by stating that the following is not a full-on critique of Elden Ring. I need many playthroughs and many hundreds of hours with the game before I decide whether or not I love it. And I just had not had the time to drink up everything that this game is putting into my doggy bowl. I am most certainly interested in doing that over the course of the next ensuing few life years, if that tells you anything. But as I previously stated, the context surrounding an opinion is more important than the opinion itself. Just about everything I'm about to say is subject to change. So, the astute and those of you with a good long-term memory will recall that I said that Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 are tied for first place in my heart. Turns out that Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 being tied for first place in my heart is perhaps the best metaphor for contextualizing my current opinion of Elden Ring. You see, there are two kinds of FromSoft games. From Demon's Souls to Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 3, you have games that are essentially second drafts of themselves. With each iteration, the designers mitigate the stuff that sucks and build upon the stuff that works. We'll call this camp remakes of Dark Souls 1. Yes, I know that Demon's Souls came out first, and so they should all technically be called remakes of Demon's Souls, but Dark Souls 1 is the one that I love, and the one that I care about, and it's my video. Sorry, I'm the one who has to put in all of this unpaid time to make it, so I get to call the shots. Sorry. Then we have the second camp. From Dark Souls 2 to Bloodborne to Sekiro, we have the experimental games, which take some of the fundamental aspects of the SoulsBorne formula and launch it off into a new direction. Dark Souls 2 changes the healing system, focuses more on group fights, and narratively switches its focus from the broader world to the player character specifically. And yes, I find these changes sufficient enough to be labeled as experimental. Then you have Bloodborne, which just feels so much different than the other Souls games, with its astounding change in atmosphere, its focus on faster, more frenzied combat, and its removal of basically every defensive option. Then you have Sekiro, which takes one aspect of Dark Souls combat, parrying, and says, well, what if we built a whole game off of this? So which camp does Elden Ring belong to? Well, to the first camp, of course. It belongs in the first camp so hard it's basically murdered Dark Souls 1 and defiled its corpse with the Seedbed curse. Elden Ring feels like a remake of Dark Souls 3, which is itself just basically a remake of Dark Souls 1, which is itself just basically a remake of Demon's Souls. I've been privately referring to Elden Ring as Dark Souls 3 Plus, and I do not mean that as an insult. I mean it as a tremendous compliment. Elden Ring takes everything that works about Dark Souls 3 and expands upon it, while leaving behind everything that doesn't really work about Dark Souls 3. It's not perfect, but it's so clearly made with care, attention to detail, and joy that it might as well be perfect. If Elden Ring were a Metallica album, it'd be the Black Album. If it were a Lord of the Rings film, it'd be Return of the King. If it were a Beatles song, it'd be Hey Jude. Elden Ring, in short, is a play-it-safe crowd pleaser. And I ain't knocking crowd pleasers. I've literally ordered the exact same thing from McDonald's for 20 years. Sometimes it's good to experiment, and sometimes it's good just to play the hits. Nobody goes to the Rolling Stones concert to hear their new music, and FromSoft has such a nice little pattern going. With the exception of Demon's Souls to Dark Souls 1, they've alternated between releasing a crowd pleaser and releasing an experimental game, and I hope they keep that going. Basically, FromSoft is what Bethesda, Ubisoft, and Activision would be if they were run by actual artists and craftspersons who possessed both vision and confidence, rather than sickos. If you like literally anything about Skyrim, Assassin's Creed, or World of Warcraft, then you are going to love Elden Ring, because it's basically a functionally perfect version of what those games try and consistently fail to be. Of course, functionally perfect is not perfect, but it's good enough that it might as well be perfect, given its competition. In fact, when trying to convince my prospective future video essaying business partner and best friend in the whole world, Cotton Hensley, that he should purchase this game, my pitch was essentially, it's like Skyrim, but good. After 20 or so hours of running around Limgrave together, he came to agree with me. And look, friendo, if an argument is good enough to convince Cotton Hensley of something, then it's good enough to convince you of something. The man literally studied rhetoric in college. Trying to convince Cotton Hensley with bad rhetoric is like showing up drunk to your DUI court date, or like trying to convince a 4-year-old to eat anything other than mac and cheese, or trying to talk to my dad about anything. There's a joke, my dad's cool.
You're a poet of understatement, boss.
It's beyond futile. However, seeing as all but one of you are not Cotton Hensley and therefore do not fully understand what I mean when I say that Elden Ring is like Skyrim, but good, allow me to explain to you what I mean when I say that Elden Ring is like Skyrim, but good. First of all, Skyrim is bad. You don't actually like Skyrim. What you like is the platonic ideal open world game, and so far, Skyrim is as close to that ideal as you've gotten. Most video games are saltine crackers, and you're hungry for an 18-ounce bone-in T-bone steak cooked to a perfect medium rare. Skyrim is a McDonald's cheeseburger, which, yeah, like when compared to a pile of saltine crackers, seems like both the bee's knees and all of that with a bag of potato chips. But by its own merits, it's just like a bloated, unfocused mess. And it's gonna clog up your arteries. Elden Ring, by contrast, is like a 12-ounce sirloin steak prepared for you by someone who loves you. Yeah, sure, it's not quite that 18-ounce bone-in T-bone steak cooked to a perfect medium rare, but in a world beset by Ubisoft saltine crackers, Bethesda McDonald's cheeseburgers, and FromSoft sirloin steaks, and they all cost $60 and take up 60 hours of your finite life, which is the only life that you're guaranteed to get, by the way, well, let's just say that, for me, the choice is no choice at all. Well, exiting the realm of Skyrim trashing and food analogies, let's return to this video's tagline, as foreshadowed in this video's thumbnail, and at the conclusion of this video's introductory segment. Elden Ring is good enough to be perfect. Is it the best version of itself that it possibly could be? Absolutely not. Does it still need a lot of work? You betcha. But hey, it's rare enough in the pre-apocalypse to get your hands on something made by people who loved what they were making. So, anytime I get my hands on something made by people who love what they were making, I have to celebrate that. I have to take what victories I can get. Let's talk about the positives. Something that I've stated before, and will certainly state again several times throughout my tenure here as a
desperate, starving YouTube person, is that the best media upon this heck earth is created by creative people who want to make something good. Even if the bad stuff these people make, either out of incompetence or ego, is far more interesting to talk about than even the most passable of corporate schlock. Elden Ring is the product of two front-running giants, Hidetaki Miyazaki and George R.R. Martin. Of course, it would be churlish to blanket credit Miyazaki for all the previous SoulsBorne success, as he has an entire multi-talented creative team backing him. The man is merely the popular opinionally elected representative for the FromSoft creative team as a whole. Just like how George is basically what you get if you blended every major fantasy and sci-fi writer from the last century into a tree-bound hive mind collective consciousness. And both folks are bringing their A game. And by A game, I mean they're just recycling their old material. From Miyazaki, we got references to Berserk, we got mystic waifus who help you level up, we got a Storm Ruler fight, we got a guy who's obsessed with killing everybody, we got religion basically being used just to trick everyone, we got a bunch of sex perverts, and we got a bunch of poison swamps. Then from George, we got a medieval fantasy setting being torn apart by war, we got the souls of the dead being absorbed into a hive mind network of trees, we got an almost fetishistic predilection towards characters with red hair, we got people getting their limbs chopped off, we got religion basically being just used to trick everybody, we got a bunch of sex perverts, and we got having no maidens.
But you, I am afraid, are maidenless.
You are maidenless. You are maidenless? Maidenless, maidenless.
Marika's titch.
Of course, I'm not knocking recycling your old material. Anytime I go to any repeat visits to any restaurant, I'm always gonna get the same thing I got last time. I've ordered the same thing from McDonald's for 20 years. And look, like if you go and you see your favorite band live, you're gonna want them to play the hits. And Miyazaki's team have been so prodigious in both consistency and quality that they've earned themselves some shortcuts, okay? And hey, we should just be happy that George has written anything and released it. Dark Souls 3 was wonderful, but it left quite a mess. Luckily, Elden Ring has come along to clean up that mess. Perhaps both the most thankless and the least interesting of its myriad of positive qualities are the quality of life changes its designers have introduced into its systems. Though more a tune-up than an overhaul, FromSoft has taken two decently sized steps towards platonic perfection in regards to its mechanical formulas. Touch-ups in the ways that invaders, co-opting, leveling up, stats, weapons, magic, and all the like are all welcome. And it sucks straight from Dark Souls 3 veins all of its venomous warts and imperfections. For example, frost builds are actually viable. The ridiculous vitality stat, which is just a stupid barrier between the player and that sweet drip, has been simplified into the endurance stat. So the pursuit of drip now comes with a fat stamina bar. And also, bud summoning is unlimited. Or well, you have to craft an item to get it, but that item is available from the beginning of the game and the resources to make it are just so available, like you're tripping over them everywhere you go, like it's functionally unlimited. So if you want to bash your head against Millennia for a couple of days and you want some help from some buds, now you can do that without having to stop every now and again to hunt for embers. And speaking of crafting, hey, they added item crafting to this game, which is like surprisingly a great fit for the series. I mean, what they did is they took all those random items that you never bought or never used and now made them craftable, so you can use them. That's awesome. I found myself using bows, which seem to have gotten a nice buff too, so that's pretty cool. They've also expanded on the great idea of weapon arts from Dark Souls 3 and made them bigger, louder, and uncut. The ability to swap out different weapons arts with the help of our sour smithing bro is a neat touch, and I definitely would have played around with that if I wasn't so addicted to charging guys with a halberd, butt slamming punks with a hammer, fire smashing freaks with my bloody tendrils finger fire sword that heals me, or wax slapping guys with my black fire sword. But hey, I'll probably play around with that one day. Spirit summons are also a neat idea, even though most of them suck. And once you get the one that summons a clone of you, you aren't going to use any other ones. But hey, the idea is neat. Another thing that's neat is the simplification of the magic system. Instead of sorceries, miracles, and pyromancies, each with their own stat requirements, casting mediums, spell books, and spell teachers, now there's just sorceries and incantations. I mean, sorceries are just sorceries from the greater Dark Souls series, but miracles and pyromancy have been smashed together to form one thing now. So your holy undead slaying paladin can also hurl fireballs at people. Also,
What's great is that you can do all of your new spell shopping with the Turtle Pope. I mean, you can give your stuff to other people too, but like Brother Corin just like yells at you all the time, and Preceptor Celavis is both a jerk and a sex pervert. And while Selen has some great step on me mommy energy, she's locked behind a mini boss in an easy to miss cellar, while the Turtle Pope is just there in the open, hanging out. And like, why wouldn't you want to hang out with the Turtle Pope? He's a turtle who's the Pope. Look at his hat. They got a Turtle Pope. He's a turtle who's the Pope. Look at his hat. Scattered around the giant world map are a bunch of isolated zones containing the levels that really matter, and the bosses that really matter. These are the legacy dungeons and mainline bosses. These are unequivocally the best parts of the game. This is what you purchase the game for. In our proverbial The Rolling Stones concert, these are the greatest hits. These are Gimme Shelter, Can't Get No Satisfaction, and Do You Hear Me Knocking? Sorry, not You Can't Always Get What You Want. I hate that song. I don't want to hear that song oscillating any molecules within ear detection of my brain ever. However, what I do want becoming photons directly into my retinas is my television display displaying Elden Ring's beautifully crafted, brilliantly designed legacy dungeons. From Stormvale to Raya Lucaria to Volcano Manor to Leyendell, the best hours spent with Elden Ring are spent in these marvelous playgrounds. FromSoft's honed expertise in creating exactly that awesome shot from The Lord of the Rings, where my 6th favorite character Pippin and my 9th favorite character Gandalf ride up the awe-striking breadth of Minas Tirith, to Howard Shore's genius score, and turning it into a wonderfully looking, marvelously designed level that I get to hang out in. I drank up these segments whenever they presented themselves, spending as much time as seemed appropriate lusciously and painstakingly picking them apart until every nook had been crannied, every trinket had been collected, and every foe had been slain. I loved every second of these levels. Perhaps the most laudable of FromSoft's growth vectors is the ever-leveling consistency and quality of its levels and boss design. From peaks and valleys in Dark Souls 1, to the clash between great and mediocre in Dark Souls 3, now to the wondrous splendor on display in Elden Ring. It is here where the most hot juice is being pumped into my appreciation tanks. I loved every legacy dungeon and thoroughly enjoyed every mainline boss, even the bosses that are puzzles. I mean, like, I'm the only guy on the planet who genuinely likes the Mikolash fight in Bloodborne because, like, it's really weird. Like, look, man, not everything needs to be like a big whapping guy, big and whapping you with his arms and his weapon all the time. You know, it's like variety that makes these encounters so delicious. In fact, the operative word for Elden Ring's main courses would be dynamic. Just about every encounter is unique and poses a different kind of challenge. Whether it's figuring out how to dodge this guy's axe, finding all these little singing college babies, figuring out how to dodge this guy's whap stat, or this guy's gravity slams, or this guy's axe, or whatever on earth is happening when Melania is doing her waterfowl dance. This section of the game is just the gift that keeps on giving. Really great job, guys. I love you. If the aforementioned legacy dungeons are the sirloin steak cooked and basted in garlic butter to a perfect medium rare, then the broader overall world design is the steamed broccoli and the mashed potatoes. Let me be 100% honest with you. I went ping-pongedly back and forth on whether or not I even liked the open world design. Given its eventual placement on the positive section of this Elden Ring critique video, showcases to you which side of the face... Which side of the face? Wait. I wrote face instead of fence. It says face here, it should say fence. Showcases to you which side of the face I eventually came down on. Elden Ring's open world game design is a net positive, though it could definitely use some innovation. There were several times during my many hours with the game in which I cajoled the television screen before me to
Just let me get to the game already!
And when one is in a sour mood, the vastness of Elden Ring's world, combined with the persistent pestiferousness of its field mobs, who so quickly become beneath you that you won't even bother to hit them, becomes a minefield where the mines can't even be bothered to detonate, and instead just repeatedly stub your toes. However, whenever one has the time and the headspace to relax and just let the open world spaces wash over one's higher cognitive functions, one comes to appreciate the silence and the softness. Contrast has, in my view, been one of FromSoft's chiefest unsung strengths. As much as people like to deride Mikolash or the Deacons of the Deep or the Ancient Wyvern as, quote,
not real bosses,
end quote, simply because they're not straightforward combat challenges, I find that the contrast they provide is crucial to the experience. A delicious raspberry Danish is meaningless without the saltine cracker to contextualize it. If FromSoft games were just all Artorias battles all of the time, it would numb the brain in the exact same way that any overtly repetitious task does. You would check all the way out. What helps make Artoria so great are all those moments where you feel lost in a level, or you're drinking in the fever juices of a gank fight, or a fight where you have to balance melee and ranged enemies, or straight up puzzles, which provide a much needed sense of variety. And that's what these moments, staring at the bedroll strapped on Torrent's rump, omnipresent, yet forever unusable, became for me. Time to chill out. If Elden Ring's legacy dungeons are the sick, face-melting guitar solo and Living Color's signature song Cult of Personality, then the luscious open world are the verses and choruses which prepare us for that burst of mastery appreciation. Anybody who thinks about songs for even more than an instant knows that a guitar solo is only as good as its build-up. And the gentle passivity of traipsing through the wilderness, ignoring monsters and picking flowers, made the hot intensity of places like Stormville or Leyendell melt my face with even more ferocity. Plus, they put a lot of thoughtfully placed content all over. I mean, not all of it's good, but I can at least appreciate the thoughtfulness. Video games are as much playing with Barbie dolls as they are stomping on beetles, and even the most hypermasculine bred scientists of modern culture cannot resist but to collect as many cute outfits with which to customize their lumpy avatar as possible. Cursory escapades into the online space have revealed to me that most people are not creative when it comes to like naming or designing the faces of their characters. But just about everybody can at least take some time to come up with a unique outfit. You even get a monkey son whose whole purpose is to customize your latest additions to your cosmetic collection. Though all of these customizations are just like limited to removing capes or removing plumes. So, Elden Ring introduces yet another mechanic it's gonna have to innovate upon in a future installment.
In a world as openly hostile as the lands between, meeting an AI-controlled assemblage of pixels that doesn't immediately try to cave in your skull with a great hammer warrants interest from pure novelty alone. These non-hostile SoulsBorne NPCs will simultaneously dazzle you with their neat outfits, confound you with their cryptic dialogue, present you with presents, or act as shops, and flavor the broader world design by infusing it with much-needed personality. If Elden Ring is a delicious 12-ounce sirloin steak cooked to a perfect medium rare, then its handful of collectible buds are the salt and pepper you sprinkle upon your meal right before you set about enjoying it. And no, they are not steak sauce. The only reason you'd use steak sauce on your steak is if you don't know how to make a steak. The only place steak sauce belongs
is in the trash.
Personally, I find something profoundly captivating about SoulsBorne NPC friends. At first, they function almost like exploration rewards. You find one, chat them up, and maybe do them a favor or two, and then they teleport into your home base to provide you with service. Many become shopkeepers or spell teachers, and still others will appear to engage in some jolly cooperation by allowing you to summon them to fight some boss monsters with you. And though it may invoke some snobbery from the kinds of people who see Dungeons & Dragons as a game about maximizing all their stats and have to segregate their Fruit Loops before they can bring themselves to eat them, I always summon my buds to help me in boss fights. Even if it's a boss I don't need help with. I just like to hang out with my friends, man. And whether my friends are composed of meat sack carbon molecules or pixels in a simulated reality game, hanging out with friends is hanging out with friends. I guess the reason I love NPCs is the same reason I love the game's obtuse lore. It transforms the world from a mere wrestling ring into a place that has people in it who want stuff. And so, in the same way that in a SoulsBorne game you are not just fighting some boss monster, but rather a rich character with a storied history within the story world, so too are you not just some player avatar wandering around a loose configuration of levels. You're a person in the world, and you meet other people in that world. People you can chat up and get to know, who you help and who in return help you, who you share triumphs with and endure tragedies with. Friendly NPCs sprinkled here and there like sprinkles upon some kind of pastry, serve to make the lands between a place that you're hanging out in, rather than just a fancy obstacle course. It lets you get lost in the world. You're no longer trying to just get to the end of the game and kill the final boss because this is a video game that you purchased and this is its function and you need to complete its function so you can get back to your boring life. Rather, you're trying to fix the world for your friends and with your friends. Or you're trying to get that moon witch to make out with you. All in all, it allows the story a chance to be meaningful, to become greater than the sum of its parts. The lore and NPCs transform Elden Ring from a game you're playing to a story you're telling yourself. And frankly, I think that's the whole point of playing a video game. It's the reason why I love, say, Fallout New Vegas. Even though its inventory management system is tedious, and it's full of bugs.
I got nothing to say to you. What's holding you up? Let's get this over with.
Now that we've had our fun being positive, let's have our fun being negative. The best way to explain this particular point is with a story. Storytime, children. Deep into the trepidatious tendrils of my first playthrough, I was tasked with an aspiration to discern a means of ascending the astral wastes to the much-lauded Altus Plateau. Having thoroughly pecked the bones of Limgrave and Liurnia, I still had not obtained the second half of the medallion which activated the large fancy elevator. Though I would not name myself a world-renowned intellect, I am proud to say that I soon deduced that the much-coveted second half of this medallion lies somewhere in the tepid Caelid wilds. Several hours and several levels previous, I had made baby tiptoes into this area, spotted giant mutated crows on the horizon, and promptly fled. Bereft of both the object of my search and the will to brave the dreaded red zone, I soon happened upon a second option. Relayed to me via by one of those weird old frog women who spout esoteric, weird old frog women wisdom whenever you let them look at your hands. She told me of a means of Altus ingress which was evidently nominally for cowards. I decided in that moment that my character Xanthobras possessed neither the intellect to catch the implication, nor had an ego underdeveloped enough to be deterred by simple name-calling. So both he and I paradoxically decided to brave the Coward's Pass. Creeping and stealthing through the twisting caves had me fighting the same scythe-wielding dirt pilgrims that I had made a science out of slaying much earlier. The caves themselves seemed cut from the same cloth as the many mines I had cleared during my younger days, so I was lulled into a kind of automation. I plundered those subterranean pathways like I was on a job, and that job was plundering subterranean pathways. Then, suddenly piercing my reverie came a particular distant singing, both beautiful and terrible. It stopped me in my tracks and snapped me to attention. Proceeding cautiously, I crept betwixt these Corinthian columns to come upon a lone figure singing upon a precipice. Beholding both my personal SoulsBorne rule of never attacking anyone who does not attack me first, and recalling the various critter-like NPCs who I had befriended throughout my travels, I stayed my blade and approached the figure. Perhaps, thought I have stumbled upon a new friend from whose vague dialogue I can further my understanding of my endeavors. Instead, the singing stopped abruptly and the lone figure pecked me into the grave. My attempts to circumvent this particular foe were costly. He enjoyed pecking me several times before I finally defeated him. My relief soon turned to ash, however, as I summited the next peak, only to hear the same dreadful singing from far away, this time from two of the beasts. Several tries later, I finally triumphed, thanks both to my budding familiarity with the pests and with the skilled bow arm of my motionless archer ghost girlfriend. Assured that the most trying of my present course tribulations were behind me, I tread through the fog gate and was promptly crushed by a giant crawling dragon lizard. Humbled, I sought both the faith to use some lightning magic I had acquired earlier and the earnest assistance of 2 friend NPCs. One, a new face bearing an unorthodox hammer and crossbow combo, and the other an old friend who'd sold me some fried shrimp earlier at a reasonable price. Armed with both fists of friendship and fists of lightning, I threw myself upon the lava beast for as many times as it took for me to defeat him. Then, satisfied with the fruits of my labor, I finally entered the Altus Plateau, looking not forward, but behind, to the memorable level I had just conquered. Wow, I thought. What a unique encounter. I will remember that struggle for the rest of my days. Imagine the crushing sadness present upon my face when I discovered after that point that these singing harpy creatures and this crawling lava worm are everywhere. Fighting them multiple times in multiple locales soon diluted my enthusiasm for the creatures, and dampened the fabulous experience I had crafted for myself during my ascension of the Coward's Pass. How hollow that memory appeared to me now that I knew that it had merely been another copy and paste level full of copy and paste enemies. Multiply this exact experience for literally every monster in the game, and you paint yourself a rather vivid picture of Elden Ring's chief disappointment. Armed as you are with the narrative knowledge I have just given you, you can now understand the full power of the following sentence. Elden Ring has maybe half the number of enemies it should? Wow, you think as you gaze upon that big old world map. That is a big map, and a big map it is. So big, in fact, that Elden Ring's ambitious makers might have eventually found it too big to fill with interesting things. The astute and perhaps fellow eidactic memory possessors among you might have noticed that earlier in this very Elden Ring video critique essay, I placed overworld design in the positives section. You might have also noticed the abstract asterisks all over that section as I backhandedly complimented this aspect of the game. To summarize myself from mere minutes previous, Elden Ring's open world is cool when you're in a good mood, but I mean most things are cool when you're in a good mood. But what about when you're not in a good mood? Well, if you're like me, then when you're not in a good mood, you catastrophize. Like, what is the point of an open world in a video game? Well, we can glean some insights into this question with the age-old Derridian method of differentiation. I once called Elden Ring Dark Souls 3 Plus, and I mean that. It's Dark Souls 3 Plus. And what Elden Ring's open world has replaced from Dark Souls 3 is Dark Souls 3's bonfire selection screen. This menu has now become a playable feature. From this, one can perhaps surmise that menus in especially older games stood in for mechanics which hadn't been invented yet. Suffice it to say that as the battle menus of, Final Fantasy VII stood in for the then unachievable particle splendor that would finally be realized in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, so too did Dark Souls 3's level selection menu evolve into being a place that you have to traverse on a finicky horse, filled to the brim with copy-paste enemies that you don't really want to engage with because you're just trying to get to the game parts already. So what is an open world? Well, it's an evolution of a menu. Elden Ring's open world is an obstinate menu for the game's real levels and its chalice dungeons. Elden Ring has inflated its level selection menu into a navigable place for the sake of feeling big. But feeling big is not the same thing as being big. Every SoulsBorne game I've played has felt big without needing an open world, simply because by the time you get to the mid to the late section, you feel like you've gone somewhere. Returning to Firelink after conquering Undeadburg in Dark Souls 1 feels big. Seeing other levels off in the distance in Dark Souls 3 and knowing that eventually those are places where you're gonna go feels big. The aforementioned Final Fantasy VII's world feels big to me because You travel it for an explicit reason. You're tracking somebody down. In that game, the world map was less of a level selection menu and more as a kind of pacing device. In the middle section of the game, story development set pieces are separated by world map traversal segments. Every time you step out onto that world map, you've gone on a little emotional journey and thus have changed alongside the characters. After the game's most intense series of emotional set pieces, you get an airship that lets you fly around anywhere in the world that you want. Except you've already been just about everywhere. So, flying anywhere fills you with nostalgic memories. You remember the last time that you came here, and you remember what's different. You feel like you've gone somewhere. You feel like you've come a long way. And that feeling like you've gone a long way is not the same thing as actually going a long way. These similar segments of world map traversal in Elden Ring don't bear any emotional meaning. It's just a cursor moving down a menu selection screen, except the cursor is a finicky horse, and the menu selection screen is a wilderness infested with wolves you can't be bothered to fight. The frightening logarithmic advancement of technology that will one day cause the end of the human species, but which at the present moment, and by present moment I mean the moment that I am presently reading this script into a microphone, not the present moment that you're watching the video. I don't know if you know this, but I'm reading this into a microphone right now. By right now, I don't mean your right now. I mean my right now. That's the moment I'm talking about. This video will forever be stranded in space. Has seen the incredible growth of what video games can achieve. This advancement has seen MIDI music being music which is generated by software, as opposed to music which is performed in some manner by a human operator. In case you're my mom watching this video and you don't know what MIDI music is, evolve from a total memory measurable in double-digit megabits, necessitating necessity, into a mere stylistic choice. If you have no idea what I've just said, let me again pad out the running time of this video essay by repeating something I've already said in a different way. For example, in 1997, my favorite video game, Final Fantasy VII, needed an entire third disc in order to cram in a 15-minute FMV ending and a recording of a choir to play alongside the excellent final boss theme, One Winged Angel. This is because a compact disc in 1997 could only store 128 megabytes of information. Nowadays, a simple Destiny patch can cost you 10 gigabytes, which a gigabyte for my mom is like 1,024 megabytes, so it's a lot more. So making some room in a video game's memory budget for some live-action recorded music is now a mere mundane possibility. Now look, I ain't knocking MIDI music. MIDI music can be great, especially when paired with a retro aesthetic. All I'm saying is that its usage is now a choice rather than a technological necessity. So why then in a game which has spared no expense in any other avenues of its creation did they cheapen out and not get a live orchestra to live orchestrate this game's music? I mean, you guys did it for Bloodborne, and the music in Bloodborne rules. I mean, just listen to this comparison. You have the final boss theme with Radagon from Elden Ring. Versus the best video game boss music of all time, Ludwig the Holy Blade. I mean, just listen to those horns. There's no comparison. A MIDI horn, it's got nothing on a real horn. So what the crunk FromSoft or Bandai Namco or, I don't know, Electronic Arts or whoever made the decision not to give us, your audience, the epic live rendition of these MIDI-laden melodies, I demand an update. Take some of that sweet, sweet money you guys have raked in, some of it from me, get the Tokyo Symphonic Orchestra on the phone and record that sweet, sweet music, and then put it into the game. Come on. When I'm fighting a pretend wolf that can shoot little magic daggers out of its mouth, I don't want to hear no computer-generated score. I want to know that a human being spent the lion's share of their life perfecting an instrument in order to play third chair on the live recording of that track. Like, come on. This game is about making these encounters as epic as possible. And in the style of the game, in the aesthetic style of the game, a live soundtrack would just work better. Like, come on, guys. Come on, Miyazaki. I'm blaming you personally. Miyazaki, I know you're watching this video. Put your give me your cell phone number so we can call and talk. We can call each other and talk about this. I will spend the meantime learning to speak fluent Japanese so that we can converse.
Torrent, or as I like to call him, is an obligatory addition necessitated by the aforementioned spiritually unnecessary open world. His obligatory status is confirmed by both his complete absence in like 99.99% of the lore, and his complete absence in all the legacy dungeons and the big line boss encounters. Even the one in the giant arena, where the boss keeps teleporting away from you. Thus marks Torrent's status as a vestigial feature, which almost none of the game's content is designed around. You need him for getting into Jarburg and for summoning the Divine Tower in Caelid, but that's about it. And don't even get me started on trying to fight on Torrent's back. 93 times out of 100, you'll find yourself either swinging leftward at nothing or rightward at nothing, which feels exactly like that motorcycle minigame at the end of the Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII, now that I think about it. Which means that like mounted combat mechanics haven't improved in 26 years. I'm sure there's some game out there that can make fighting on the back of a horse fun, but this sure isn't that game. And finally, there's not enough of my best blood Blythe in the game. Come on, FromSoft. You're gonna put a 12-foot-tall wolfman in a kick-ass outfit into this game, and you're gonna make him central to one of the ending quest lines, and you're gonna plaster him on practically every goddarn loading screen, and you're gonna give him such a buttery, smooth, soothing Welsh voice.
Ah, good to see you.
And then you're only gonna make him summable for 2 boss encounters? One of which is just a glorified mini-boss, and the other is this showcase boss where you summon half the goddarn roster of characters for a spectacle fight. And then you're gonna make me have to kill him? Come on, FromSoft. Blythe and his 6 spinning moves should be summable for like at least 5 boss fights, or at least give us his spirit ashes like in the upcoming DLC. Something. FromSoft, come on. Come on! I want more time with my wolf friend. Well, that's all I've got. As always, I am and continue to be Zachary Cush, and you just found out whether or not I think Elden Ring is good. To recap, yes, Elden Ring is good. In fact, it's good enough to be perfect. Well, my friends, stay true to yourselves, stay curious, and I shall see you in the future. Goodbye!
So for those of you looking to play you some Elden Ring,